Welcome back to Jay's Smokehouse and the History of Cannabis series, Extended, Episode 2. This will be covering most of the Bronze Age. In my last episode on the Stone Age, we left off with the first emperor of China, Fu Xi. Now moving on to another emperor of China, Shen Nung. Shen Nung is considered the father of Chinese medicine and also a patron of herbalism and apothecaries. He is said to be the first one to discover the healing benefits of cannabis and also ginseng and ephedra. He focused on cannabis as medication for rheumatism, gout, malaria, menstrual problems, and even absent-mindedness. Now he wrote about all of this in his book, The Great Herbal, or The Pin Sao, which is still being used today, although most likely heavily altered. Moving on to 2300 BC, we have another book, the Ching, and this is one of the oldest books in China, if not the world. And there is a passage in this book that states that the land in the Shantung province is, and I quote, whitish and rich, with silk, hemp, lead, pine trees, and strange stones. Its people paid tribute to their rulers with hemp. The warlords' armies were dressed in armor sewn with hemp cord, and their bows were strung with hemp strings that were far superior to the bamboo fiber they replaced. Coats, bucklers, and helmets were made of hemp prepared with vinegar to strengthen it. Hemp was grown around every lord's castle to provide for their military needs. And so what this is showing is how important cannabis or hemp was to these early cultures. I mean, that would have meant the world of a difference between bamboo and hemp, because hemp could be so much more sturdier, stronger, and give you so much more protection and offer much more powerful bows. And that allowed you to be able to shoot your arrows further and stronger. And so it just gave you an edge on everyone around you. And so before bronze, hemp was offering an upgrade to armor as opposed to bamboo, and that's really cool. Now moving on to around 2000 BC and moving locations from China to Africa. Egyptians were extremely advanced in their knowledge of the human body, thanks to many factors. One of those reasons would be mummification. It really gave them an intimate look into the human body and gave them knowledge that many other cultures wouldn't have for a long time. There is even evidence on skulls of brain surgery being done in around 2000 BC and the patient living, and actually living for quite a long time. But what that says is they have such an advanced knowledge of medication. Now, because Egyptians were so fascinated with the afterlife and so connected spiritually and had such a connection with religion, they have theorized that their first doctors would have been more magicians, because they saw sickness and disease more as evil beings entering the body instead of it actually being a sickness. However, one of the main things that these magicians or doctors would have been using would have been herbs, so they actually would have been aiding these people. As to when cannabis actually made its way to Egypt, we're not really sure. However, there is residue of cannabis on artifacts dating before 2000 BC. So we can safely say that before 2000 BC, they knew of cannabis. Now, it didn't take the magicians or first doctors long to realize that cannabis was one of the best, and they became very popular with their use of cannabis. The Egyptians also kept great record of what they were doing on papyri. And we actually have many of those papyri today. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are more complete than others. And also, some of these papyri give us one of the first completed books in all of ancient history. And what we know from these papyri is that the ancient Egyptians actually used cannabis as a salve to treat eye sores and glaucoma. And even today, modern science has come to prove what the ancient Egyptians have said what cannabis could do with anti-inflammatory effects, especially for the ocular region. And there's even reference in some of these papyri encouraging all to plant medicinal cannabis. The oldest grouping of papyri that we would have had in ancient Egypt would have been the Ramesseum papyri, and they are named for the city they were found in, Ramesseum. Ramesseum was supposed to be named after Ramses II, who commissioned the city to be built. And another interesting note, and I remember reading about this when I was much younger, they found on Ramses II mummy cannabis pollen, and that dated back to around 1200 BC. I always found that really fascinating. However, the Ramesseum Papyri actually date back to around 1750 BC. And so they're much older. And then another interesting thing about the Ramesseum Papyri, on the third papyrus, that's where we actually get the treatment for the eyes. And it states that you ground cannabis and celery, leave it overnight, and put it on the eyes. Then the next oldest one to date back to around 1500 BC would be the Ebers Papyri. Now the Ebers Papyri would be the oldest complete book that we have in all of history, or at least one of the. And what I find really cool is one of the oldest complete books mentions cannabis. Now the Ebers Papyri are named after George Ebers, who obtained the Ebers Papyri in the 1800s. Then we have the Berlin Papyri, and these are dated back to about 1300 BC. And this is actually the first time that we see in Egypt of cannabis being mentioned as a remedy for fever. Then the last grouping of papyri that we have is the Chester Beatty Papyri, or at least the last ones that we have so far. Now it doesn't seem that cannabis is mentioned too much in these papyri. However, it's the first mention that we have of cannabis being consumed in Egypt. Now I'm sure it was being consumed before this, but this is the first time it's mentioned. And this is dated back to around 1300 BC also. Now moving to India, it seems that cannabis was introduced to India around 2000 to 1500 BC. And that is by the Sakas or the Scythians. It also seems that the modern name cannabis might have come from the Sanskrit canna or sana. And so the earliest name that they had for cannabis would have been banga. And then I found out that the name Bengal or Bangla means Bangland. And so Bangladesh actually means Bangland people. And I found that really cool. However, I'm going to go ahead and leave off there. I'll pick back up with India on episode 3 next Tuesday. Now, if you enjoyed this video or you learned anything, please leave a like and a comment and let me know what you think. And also don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can stay up to date with new videos coming out in the future. And as always, Jay is going to go smoke a J.